All right. Good morning, everyone. We are just right at 9 o'clock, so I want to jump in and get started. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on today's installment of our webinar and discussion series. I'm Jenny Locanthe. I am the director of Kansas SHRM last year and this year. We are a volunteer leader team, and we've been working to bring you this series throughout the pandemic and appreciate your continued engagement and participation on these calls. Part of the magic of these is the community that we have and your engagement in it. So thank you so much for being here. Today's topic is one that we've gotten several requests in various forms for throughout the series, and trying to just get a handle on how do we provide support to our organizations and to our employee populations during these times. They're certainly incredibly challenging, and it takes a little bit of a special touch, right? Because we're all experiencing so many different things during this time. And so our executive team came together and identified a couple of experts from EAP programs that we work with. Excuse me while I admit a few more folks into our meeting. And so I'm so excited to bring them to you today, and they've got some great information to share, and we've got some great questions that have come in ahead of time. So thanks again for being here. We're going to start off with caring for self. You know, we often hear lately about putting your own mask on before you put other people's masks on, because if you aren't helping yourself, you can't help other people. So I think that's an incredibly important topic to kind of set the stage for how we care for other people. And then we're going to jump into communication in times of crisis. And as I mentioned, then we will do some Q&A at the end. If you're just joining us for the first time or maybe unfamiliar with Kansas SHRM, we represent all SHRM members in the state of Kansas. That includes local chapter members and also national SHRM members that maybe aren't part of a chapter, and the chapters themselves. As I mentioned, we are a volunteer leader group. We've got about 30 people on our council, and it's just a great team. We've got our mission and vision up there on the screen, and certainly if you want to learn more about Kansas SHRM, you can visit us on our website. We've got a great COVID-19 page that has recordings of all of the programs that we put on, in addition to the slides, and even more recently, question and answer summaries, so that if you missed it or couldn't quite write fast enough, you can reference those as you need to. This is our executive team. You can see my picture there. I said I'm the state director. I've also got my director-elect, David Love, represented, Secretary-Treasurer, Michaela Navarro, and our past director, Shelby Smith. And then what you're seeing now is our executive administrator team. We are so fortunate to have this team on our side as well. They handle amazing logistics for some of our programs that we host throughout the year. Some are as big as 700 people, so this is really something that takes some doing, and we are so fortunate to have them. If you are in one of our local chapters in the state of Kansas, you probably already know Natalie Bright. She is our lobbyist and represents us in Topeka, and annually goes around to all of our chapters and presents a legislative update. So they are wonderful and are joining us on the call today. Just a few notes about upcoming programs. On Friday, we have an employment law update. This is another topic that has been requested quite a bit as we've proceeded through this situation. I'm really excited about our guest speakers for Friday's program. Of course, we're featuring Natalie Bright to speak about the state perspective, and we're also welcoming Cheryl Vincent, who works on the Ways and Means Committee, and she's going to share information about COVID-related legislation at the federal level. And then we're also going to have Lisa Horn from SHRM. She's the Director of Government Affairs there, and we'll be providing some insights from that perspective. And then next week, we continue to get questions about unemployment and the shared work program. So we're going to bring back our folks to speak about that and continue to take your questions and move forward in that vein. And then next Friday, we're going to try something a little bit new. We're going to try to use the breakout feature on Zoom and break into discussion groups with your HR community, different peers on different topics, and let you kind of discuss in small groups, share what you're doing at your organizations, what's working well, what are your challenges, and hopefully create that connection when we can't meet together in person. So bear with us as we try some new technology. You'll be able to, when the registration link is up, you'll be able to indicate which discussion topic you want to be involved in, and you will be connected with your HR peers on that. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy Winter, who's joining us from MPAC. Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome. Good morning. I hope you all are enjoying this beautiful Wednesday morning. Great to be with you. And I have to say it's very impressive for you all to take a moment out of your day to first think about yourself before caring for others. As Jenny noted, it's important to start that off before you start to talk about supporting employees and supporting the companies that you serve. Your minds are probably spinning with lots of things that you have on your agenda today, but for the next 15 minutes, you're actually only going to think about yourself. This may have been a long time since you've done that, if ever. So I would ask that you transition into this time just with some deep breaths. We sometimes are plagued with those short, shallow breaths throughout the day. So just trying to deep breathe in for the count of 4 and hold it for the count of 4 and blow it out for the count of 4. Everyone's muted, so no one's going to hear you if you decide to really blow hard. That'll help you transition into just thinking about just you. And your mind might wander to that grocery list or the call that you need to make to your parents or what you have on your agenda for work today, but just gently try to bring it back to where we're at. You can go to the next slide, Jenny. Oftentimes we feel like the image on the left might be that way right now today. Hopefully not, if you continue all of that deep breathing and just trying to stay focused in where you're at and what you're listening to and thinking about yourself. The image on the right for me, that's what I'm looking for every day, and hopefully you are too. For me, it represents peace and positivity and intention. And I'd ask that you use the chat box now just to outline one word to describe what you're looking for today. What does that feel like for you? You can move to the next one. At MPAC, we have the privilege of working with a variety of HR professionals, and we see the uniqueness in your role. We hope that you see it too, and you take a moment just to feel some pride about what you do. Oftentimes, literally, you have other responsibilities beyond human resources, but in the caring for the humans, and aiding them in success and aiding your company in success, you hold such delicate information. You have a vast variety of experiences with people. You might welcome them to the company. You might help them leave. You might see their personal joys of getting married or having a baby. But then again, the sadness of loss that they may experience, and the struggles that they have both in their professional and personal lives. So this is challenging but rewarding work. All of this absorption of other people's stories impacts us. You can move to the next slide, Jenny. Compassion fatigue is real, and this is something to be cognizant of in typical times. But this has been far from typical over the last 6 weeks, and this critical incident that has occurred has impacted a variety of people in a variety of ways. So if you click to the next slide, Jenny. The next 2 slides list some possible symptoms. Those are symptoms of compassion fatigue, but also symptoms that occur when we have experienced a critical incident like what we have all experienced. Again, just try to stay focused on you and your experiences and where you're at. If you look over the next few slides, this one and the next one, use the chat function to just highlight the most significant symptom that you have experienced over the last few weeks? What's the one thing that stands out for you that you have experienced? There might be other things too. Most of what I'm seeing in the chat box is what we hear from those that we serve. Probably fatigue is one of the most significant symptom. Change in sleep, probably the next one. Anxiety, and I think the thing that people don't recognize is irritation, just that agitation and irritation being a symptom of experiencing a critical incident or compassion fatigue. We might tend to want to be alone more often than not, or just engage in kind of mindless activities to kind of numb out because we're exhausted. So our bodies and our minds have to try to make sense of this, what has happened. So moving on to how do we start to care for ourselves? We probably struggle with good self-care routines normally, and in critical times, we certainly get off track more often than not. We want you to just think first about basic activities that help, and I know it seems odd, but we do forget to eat. We can go through a day and it might be 2 or 3 o'clock before we even think about having something to nourish our bodies. So think about your most significant symptom and what are some things you can do to address that symptom. These are just basic things that you can do to care for yourself. If you already have a good self-care routine, then try to find something different, something new to add in. Sometimes just stating these out loud and making a commitment to do something for yourself every day is important. So use the chat box. Sometimes that helps us with accountability. And if you have other people that you know or are a close colleague with that you trust, if they're watching the chat, maybe they'll help hold you accountable to that. Looking at the chat, I can tell you hydration is one of the ones. Hydration and exercise are the two things that we hear pretty frequently. Starting your morning earlier and having just some quiet time to plan your day is helpful too. Before the day gets a hold of you, you take a hold of the day and plan out how you would like to approach the day, what the most important thing on your list is. But definitely giving to yourself first. We serve clients who oftentimes compassion fatigue can turn into burnout, and so those that are already in burnout, sometimes very, very difficult to not engage in work activities the second you get up. So if you are getting up and checking your email as the very first thing, grabbing your cell phone and looking at work as the very first thing, I would really challenge you to look towards your quiet time, leaving your cell phone away, and starting with some just intentional time for you and doing the things that you love to do. So what keeps us from doing this if we're not very good at the routine? What is keeping us from doing this? It's different for all people. I'll have to pick on Michaela because I know her and I saw that sometimes she, it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock maybe it said before she realizes she hasn't had any water. So making sure Oh, I like this whole set an alarm on your phone. Look, I'm not the only one talking to Michaela right now. She's getting support from other people. Setting an alarm on your phone is really important. There are lots of mindfulness. I saw a lot of comments about mindfulness. There's some great free apps that send you a little note that reminds you to do that. To take a time to do some breathing or to listen to some relaxing music. That would be a great time to actually be hydrated and maybe go to the restroom or get a snack. All good things to care for you. If you find yourself, though, putting yourself last or giving up activities that you actually have scheduled in to build your resilience, think about why that is. Oftentimes it is we feel guilty, we convince ourselves that giving to others continually is what's right and what's best. But think about what it is for you and maybe chat that out to your coworkers and to your colleagues here. What keeps you from putting you first? More information about the time, the alarms on the phone. That's great. Guilt is a big one, and time are big ones that we hear. If you schedule those things in first and just stay committed to those, we find that people have good success with that. We have a little activity for you, and you may want to use your cell phone to text yourself or make a note of this next slide. If you have a piece of paper, you can certainly jot it down, but this is something I think you can look at every day that will help keep you focused. So the first thing, understanding your why. Some of you that love Simon Sinek like I do, you've heard this, understanding your why. It's really just a purpose statement, your own personal mission statement. We saw the SHRM mission. I love Simon too. Hopefully that's something you oftentimes do for yourself too. If you can just give yourself 20 minutes a day to watch a YouTube video on leadership or something on stress management, people that you love. Brene Brown is another one. I call it my midday Brene shot. I need to have some of that to keep me going. So Simon talks about your why. So what is your personal mission statement, your purpose statement? If you can write this out, it may be you believe all people should enjoy their work, should love their work, should feel successful. If you can, me and Stacy, whoever that is, we share the same name with the EY, and she's loving some of the same stuff I'm loving. Thank you, Stacy. If you really want to write that out, then it's something that you can look at every single day. Why is it that you're doing what you're doing? Why do you keep coming back to that? You're choosing, obviously, to stay in your role, and you've chosen this work, this unique and very important work. So what is it that you believe about it? What is your why? I actually have this written now, and I look at it every day when I get in my car to go to work. I've actually had to bring it in and put it inside my little morning devotion time because now I'm not always getting in my car to go to work. But to look at it every day helps remind me of what I am doing, why I'm choosing to do this. The next thing is outlining one of your key values. Now, for today's time, I usually encourage people to at least do 2 of these things. For those of you that love Brene Brown, she calls this living into your values. So making sure that you outline for today just at least one key value. What is something that is a core for you? For me, for instance, it's compassion. I believe all people should feel cared for and feel important and love themselves. And so I have to outline a couple of behaviors that tells me I am living out that value. Just that simple. What are a few behaviors that I commit to that demonstrates that core value that would leave people believing that is a core value for me? So for an example, if mine is compassion, One very specific behavior is to give warm eyes. As a matter of fact, I have some accountability partners at work. One of them I think is on the line today, and she might say warm eyes to me to remind me that that's a behavior that I'm committed to, that demonstrates one of my core values, and that maybe my eyes are not very warm. It's great on Zoom because you can see yourself. Most days when we're at the office and in meetings, we can't see our own faces. Probably should. Might tell us a little bit about where we're at. Another example of a behavior would be an encouraging word. So only using language that lifts up, trying to be as positive as possible, saying positive words. John Gordon is wonderful, gives some great examples of how to really just change your language to focus towards the positive. So I look at these things every day to remind myself that if I am not doing those behaviors, that's a little early warning sign. Something is starting to get off track if I'm not doing those specific behaviors. Another behavior that I have for compassion is head up. So if my head is not up, my eyes are not warm, then I know something is askew. And it really has to be that blatant for me to notice that I'm getting off track. So that's one of the early warning signs, but there are also feelings that occur that we can kind of use as an early warning sign. If you feel open to sharing that, what is your early warning sign? Do you know what that is? For instance, for me, besides not having head up, giving warm eyes, it's when I start to feel resentful. When someone comes into my office and I start to feel frustrated because I'm being pulled off of a task that I feel like I need to get done, that is more important than the human being that is in my office. That is definitely an early warning sign for me. Not smiling, that's a good one. Or feeling a flutter in your chest, that might be an early warning sign. Oh, shutting my door. Oh, I know that person. And she's told me that's her early warning sign. Feeling like I'm working harder than others, maybe like I'm the only one that cares about this. Where are all the other people that care? Those are also very early warning signs. Tension in your body too. Yes, paying attention to those things is key. So if you move forward to the next slide, really what we're encouraging you to do is find what Brene oftentimes calls as that empathy circle. People who know these things about you. These are actually a great activity to do with maybe your HR team, if you have one. Or even your personal friends, people that you trust. If you share these values, you share these behaviors, you share your early warning signs, then they can help be on the lookout for you, with you, and gently and lovingly say, hey, I see that you might be getting off track here. What's going on? Or your door's been shut. Or Stacy, I see that you're rubbing your neck. Does that mean you have tension there? What's going on? Is there something I can do to help? How can I support you? So self-care is important, but also self-compassion. So we're going to get off track. We're going to certainly make mistakes. But offering yourself the same amount of grace and that same type of grace that you offer others is important. That's something that we struggle to do. I'll leave you with a quote from my quiet time this morning. I found it quite interesting that this was the quote that led my devotion that I had this morning. We can not choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. The point, I think, of today's self-care topic is really knowing that if you can manage yourself, can't control what goes on around you, only can control what's inside of you and then what comes out of you, then you'll be more likely to be in line with your own values and able to be intentional about the way you communicate with others and support others, which I think is a good segue into Terry talking about the importance of communication, especially during times of crisis.
Thank you, Stacy. That's perfect. And that was a great segue into Terry's topic. So I really don't feel like I need to say anything else. Terry, take it away. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I thought that was really helpful. Everything that Stacy said about taking care of yourself is so important because, as they said, if you're a pitcher of water and you keep giving and giving and giving to others, then you run dry. And you have to take care of you in order to be able to help others if you want to. So one of the problems with what's going on is that there's no roadmap to follow with a situation like this, since we've never had a pandemic shut down the country before. Crisis can bring out the best and the worst in people. They allow you to grow and learn more about yourself if you allow yourself to. As a leader, you have the added challenge of leading a team during times of uncertainty, and how you choose to do this can have long-term effects, hopefully for the better. When a crisis occurs, your team will look to you for guidance, strength, and direction. And currently, we have a lot of groups who've had to adjust to working from home or even closing down some or all of their processes. Other groups are so swamped that keeping up with demand can be crazy making, along with the need for social distancing. As HR management, this has likely increased your work no matter what the changes were. And the fact is that you would be hard pressed to find anyone in America that hasn't been affected by the pandemic in one way or another. And so figuring out how to cope with the stress can be very difficult. So today what I'm going to talk a little bit about are, stresses of being a leader, resilience, and things to consider regarding communication. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about resources. As an HR, your role is likely changing day to day depending on your work situation. If you are facing furloughing or laying off people, that can be very stressful because you care about your team and you worry about the stability of your company. A lot of you mentioned feeling guilty, and that can come from situations like this. You may have had to let people go in the past, but my bet is that it would not be to this degree. People are likely all over the place with their reactions to the current situation. Some may be in a good place, but if this crisis has affected their paycheck or if they're high risk, then they're more likely to be stressed. Many people have had trouble sleeping, as you talked about, having headaches, fatigue, all of those things that you're talking about, and that only adds to the problem. You're dealing with your own as well as your team's reactions to this crisis. So having to work from home, for some sounds good, but the reality is that there may be other people there that are causing you stress, or you may be struggling with feeling isolated. And we have concerns that one of the effects of the crisis is going to be an increase in domestic violence, child abuse, substance abuse, and divorce. And these issues could be issues for you or your employees, which then affects their work. If you have an employee that's died or become ill with the virus or any other reason, you may be the one that's expected to notify coworkers, other departments, and possibly even customers. And this can be very challenging, but without doing it, this can lead to the need for rumor control. Now you're having to look down the road at what will happen when the restrictions are lifted. And we will all have to consider priorities, possibilities, and there will be will there be changes or closures or simply returning to the way things were. This situation gives you an opportunity to think outside the box, but it sometimes can be intimidating. Resilience is, you know how after different disasters, we see t-shirts that say, Las Vegas strong, Texas strong. Well, what that message is from these is that we are a resilient people, that we can and have overcome adversity. Resilience is a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, and it means bouncing back from difficult experiences. It doesn't mean you won't have strong emotions or reactions, or what happened doesn't mean it won't be difficult for you. Emotional pain and sadness are common in people who have suffered major adversity. And so even just listening to or seeing all of your comments in the chat, you are resilient. But I know oftentimes we don't feel that way. And so I just want you to keep that in mind, that resilience doesn't mean it's easy, but it is something that sometimes we have to work at. There's a lot of things that you can consider as far as in communication with employees. And a lot of this you know, and it's kind of a reminder of things that you know and do every day. Number one is giving employees clear expectations, directions as appropriate, so that they know what to expect and what you need from them. Communication is an important key, as when there's a vacuum for information, it will be filled with rumor and assumptions. Consider what your message is and what you can and cannot share, and keep it simple. Be honest and as open as possible. This is an opportunity to build or to lose trust. It's okay to say you don't know something if that's the truth. Be careful about speculating, as this can lead to rumors and reactions that may be premature or inappropriate. Consider what their concerns will be and address them. If you were getting the same information for the first time that you're giving them, what would your questions be? Provide resources to them if that's appropriate to the situation. It's important to remember your audience. They are stressed, just like you are. They may not hear everything you say. As many of you said, it's hard to focus right now. People are not sleeping well. People are having headaches. And so are the people you're talking to. So they may forget what you say. And so try not to get frustrated. You may just have to repeat the message a few times. Keep it simple, and then follow up conversations in writing so that people can refer to what you said. Going along with that is trying not to take their behavior, words, or reactions personally. And I know it's easier said than done, but this is true whether you're communicating to upper levels, to same levels, or lower levels. You may be the one that's having to give bad news and you represent the company, or you're just the one that's in front of them. Now, this is the thing. Bad behavior is not excusable at any time, and it's appropriate for you to set boundaries. If you're communicating on the phone or Skype, give them notice. If you continue this behavior, I will hang up. And then if it does continue, then do so. Disconnect. If it's in person, then you may need to stop the conversation, ask them to leave, or if it's in your office. As a rule, they're angry at the situation and not at you. If someone is getting upset, work to stay calm, do the mindfulness exercises and taking the deep breathing like Stacy talked about, and try not to respond in a negative way. Remember the basics of communication: active listening skills, eye contact, giving them your attention when you are talking to them. Ask questions and reflect back what you've heard them say without judging what they've said. And be aware of your nonverbal communication. I liked what Stacy said is, are my eyes warm? What message are you giving with your body language if you are visual to them? And the fact is that we can hear a lot of attitude in your voice even if they can't see you. Being optimistic is really important. It's good to focus on what you can do, not what you can't. It's real important that you find a support team. If people are telling you their situation, it may not be the place for you to share yours unless they're your peers. But it's important for you to talk about your stress with those you trust, because holding it in and stuffing it will only harm you. You have on here a group of folks who are going through the same thing you are. And that's one of the wonderful things about being part of an organization like this, is that you can meet other people and talk to other people who are going through the same thing that you are, and they can relate to what's going on. Most of you have an EAP, and they are always there to support you. So always consider If you need to talk to somebody and it's in the middle of the night because you're not sleeping, give them a call, because they're supposed to have someone there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With, do some taking deep breaths, picking up the phone, one thing you can always do is build in that taking those deep breaths into your pattern. So every time you pick up the phone, take a slow, deep breath. Hello. And that way you're calming yourself throughout the day. Don't wait until morning or till night to calm yourself. Just build that in as you are going through the day. Now, there are a couple resources that I wanted to let you know about. And if any of you are, do not have an EAP for some reason, or if you know somebody who is struggling, because you may know people who don't work for you, but they're struggling. And New Directions Behavioral Health has opened up a crisis line that's open to anyone over the age of 18 who needs support related to the pandemic. It's not for everything, but it is. We have counselors 24/7, and you can see that number on the screen. It's 833-848-1764. Another thing that we became aware of is something called the My Strength app. And Stacy mentioned about apps being out there. This one is something that we provide a lot of our accounts, and it helps with building emotional strength, finding inspiration, tracking your progress. They also have tools for mindfulness. And they let us know that they are opening it up for free for anyone over the age of 13 from now until June 30th. So feel free to check it out and share it with your organization or even your family members. We're living through historical times. Years from now, you'll be telling stories about what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic and how you rose to the occasion. Please communicate from a position of compassion for yourself as well as for others. There is no perfect way to get through this, so do the best you can with the information you have, and make sure that you're reaching out for support. And think about what you want on your t-shirt after making it past this pandemic. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I think each of you had such great insights to help us guide both our self-care practices and the importance of that, and then also these very tricky, nuanced communication situations that we're facing at work. It's definitely a challenging time that is asking a lot of us, I think, and teaching us and prompting us to learn in new ways. So thank you very much. We did have a few questions that were submitted ahead of time. I haven't seen any come through chat, so please do remember that if you have follow-up questions for either of these ladies, please do submit them. But we'll start with what was submitted ahead of time. So there's been as we continue to progress through this situation, we're starting to see, I want to knock on wood, the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're hearing talk about going back to work and returning to maybe a little bit of normalcy. But there's a lot of nervousness out there. So can you speak to kind of ways that we can calm our staff and provide reassurance and confidence as they're thinking about returning?
I would recommend considering if it is an option for people to work from home, whether it's full-time, part-time, or not at all. It's found that people are actually more productive and happier employees and there was less turnover when they have some flexibility. I think letting them know the steps you're taking and that you're planning as far as keeping things hygienic and protecting them is one of the most important things you can do. They want to know that they're safe. They want to know that you care and that you're going to continue this, that this isn't going to be, well, the first week we cleaned it well and now let's get back to business. How are you going to hold meetings? How are you going to interact with them? And as you give them that information, that is going to help them feel more confident. Expect the anxiety. It may be once they return, hopefully after a couple days, people will calm down. It's kind of like when I walk out in public, it's like, can I talk to somebody? It's like everybody's got their mask on. It's almost like you feel like you can't talk, and you say something, people like pop up at you. But being very clear about what you're going to do. Are you going to be wearing masks? Are you going to be wearing gloves? And are you providing those to them? Those kind of things.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Stacy?
I agree with everything Terry said. I would just really encourage people to communicate that in a very clear but very consistent way. So posting it, sending via email, people, and I have found myself, I'll admit, getting super annoyed because I've communicated something I feel like over and over and over. Patrick Lencioni, another guy that I love to listen to and read, says communicate ad nauseum, and even more so now, just making sure people understand your plans and that your emails or communication is filled with hope and positivity and value and thanking. It might feel icky if that doesn't come natural to you, but really going overboard with that will, I think, pay dividends in the future.
Mm-hmm.
There is surveying that could be done too. That's the only other thing I would mention is I found some really interesting surveys, and you can create your own easily, obviously for free through SurveyMonkey. It says, you know, what is it that you need? Are you clear about our plans? Is there something we can provide that we're not providing? Just asking people is certainly half the battle as well.
I love those suggestions. And I think personally, when I know I'm sending something out and I want to make sure I'm hitting the right note, and I don't feel like maybe I'm in a place where I'm seeing it clearly, or I recognize that I have a different lens, I love to identify a couple of people that I trust that I can test my message on. Maybe even someone that's in my target audience that is new to it and can provide that perspective of, I really didn't understand what you were trying to say here, or it didn't come across the way that I think you intended.
That's good.
Love those. So we got a question about kind of the difference between employee experiences. So depending on what kind of organization you're in, you might have had a group of folks that have not really had any interruption to what they've been asked to do. It might be more complicated, more dangerous, but they're still coming to work. They're still doing their job. And then you might have a part of your population that has been completely changed. Maybe they're working remotely or have had other changes. So how might you navigate your different employee populations and maybe any resentment or, I don't know, the haves and the have-nots?
Mm-hmm. Definitely people are oftentimes and I think Terry mentioned this, in crisis, it can bring out the best of us and it can bring out the worst of us. And we ourselves even have been surprised when dealing with our company specifically and others that we serve. Sometimes it's just not the people that you think are struggling would be struggling. We continue to try to encourage one another and ourselves to offer grace and recognize everyone experiences things differently. And I think about the book, The 5 Appreciations in the Workplace, trying to think about how do we show appreciation and kindness and value and respect. It's really an individual task, and it's difficult if you have a large amount of employees, but engaging others and showing that thanks and appreciation I think will certainly pay off, and helping them stay focused on their own experience and what they need to feel appreciated and supported. We actually did just a small little activity and are encouraging other companies to do this too. Besides sending emails of thanks and individual texts of thanks, we've actually, for our group that's working remotely, have sent to their homes a small little gift, something to thank them. Can even be a handwritten card that is mailed to their home, just to let them know that we're thinking of them. And then those that are still coming to the office, wherever we could relax things, like you can wear jeans, or you can dress however you'd like from the bottom down, but just have something professional from the top up. Or making sure there's a snack at the office or drinks at the office if there's just a few coming in.
I agree. I think those are really good suggestions. I think it's important to check with them, because not only are they having different work experiences, but they're having different home experiences. And you may not be aware that they had to move their mother in with them, or they haven't been able to see family for 2 months because of the situation. It's important to check with them, see, try to understand what they're anxious about. And I agree with Stacy. I think those are some really good ideas about how you can let them know how much you appreciate them. I think that's always important.
Thank you. So this next question kind of talks about, so many of us are working from home now, and we've discovered that this is possible, and some of us might even really, really like it. What happens when we return to the new normal and our employers or maybe us as the HR person is going to be messaging with, so we're not going to be doing the work from home thing anymore, and here's why. That seems like it's going to be kind of a tricky message because we know that it works. Do you have any suggestions for handling those situations?
One of the things I would do is I would encourage the company to look at the data and recognize that it may still work in the current time, even if it's not full time, even if it's 2 days a month. That may appease those folks so that they feel like they've still got that piece of flexibility, because again, the studies from before the pandemic were that it can really be a very positive thing. I think that as people get back into the groove and letting them know, yes, we will come back to work, and making it fun for them, making it enjoyable for them, like Stacy said, having snacks there, anything that you can do to welcome them back into the office may be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that suggestion. And along with one of our next questions, someone had shared that what they're doing at their workplace to make it fun and welcome them back and help them feel safe is to kind of have a return to work kit that includes training, that includes what you need to know about working in this workspace after the pandemic or during the pandemic. I think it goes back to your message of communication, Terry, and not only communicating, and I think Stacy, you touched on this too, not just communicating one time. If you think you're over communicating, you might be just hitting it right at that point. Communicate a little bit more. So giving people kind of what they can expect. So thank you for sharing that, whomever submitted that with their question. Appreciate that. The next question has to do with kind of speaking the language the public wants to hear and being skittish, again, about kind of returning to work and being out in public, physical precautions. I think you both have spoken to that in different ways and from different aspects about helping people feel comfortable and helping people feel safe in their environments.
One of the things I took the risk this weekend, and I'm in Dallas, Texas, and they made it so that restaurants could reopen at 25% capacity. And so one of the things I saw was that there was a man in a lab coat that was cleaning things. He was, going around cleaning the tables and stuff like that. And somehow just the visual of that, seeing, okay, they really are taking this seriously, that helped me to feel safer being there and seeing people in gloves and masks. And I think it's more than just putting the dots on the floor, but communicating that we are taking this very seriously. We recognize that this is hard for you to come back, but we are here for you. And making sure that your staff are wearing the gloves and the masks so that people recognize that you are taking things seriously. That's going to help people feel safer coming back to your workplace, I think.
I'd also say that communication needs to come from a variety of levels. So it can't obviously just rest on the shoulders of the human resources department. That I know human resources professional have to kind of rattle the cages and get the troops together for a couple of different championing different messages, and this would be one where if there's a message that comes from the top, it's the same and consistent message that also comes from the HR department, but also an individual manager who just takes 5 minutes out of their day to ask if they're feeling comfortable. Do you have everything you need? We heard a story of an employee who works at a large company, and there were signs everywhere about how we care for you. And because we care for you, we're asking you to wash your hands repeatedly to keep everyone safe, except for the bathrooms. Many of them had been locked down, and the ones they were going to did not have paper towels or soap. So it's really just making sure that what you provide connects with the message that you're giving. So having that kit is a wonderful idea. It's a small investment to make sure somebody has their own personal hand sanitizer, some Kleenexes at their desks, to make sure that you supply gloves, you supply Clorox wipes, whatever you can get your hands on, to have that all over the place, not just for your staff, but for your clients, your customers, your visitors, and keeping that message consistent throughout.
One of the best things I saw in reaction to a crisis, I worked in a situation where there was a large mercury spill in a plant, and 1,200 employees were sent to other plants because they couldn't work there. And when people had to come back, of course, they were scared because now they were coming into a building that had had a mercury exposure. And some things that they did that are really good to do are, one, have a meeting right up front. And I know back then we were able to have a big, large group of people. And so you're going to have to figure out how can you communicate with everyone. It may be a Zoom meeting, and having the person at the top do that. It helps them to feel connected. Having management get around to the couples, huddles, checking in with people. It helps with rumor control, and we want to encourage people to work with each other, because that support network is one of the things that is important with resilience. As Stacy said, feed them. Another thing is pitching in. People really feel better when they see upper level people pitching in and being there to right beside them doing work. That can be very helpful. And I think the big thing is communication, like we said.
Thank you. So Stacy, you talked a little bit about giving yourself grace and compassion and giving that to other people as well. How do you walk that line? And I know I struggle with this too, of, okay, I'm giving myself grace and understanding versus I'm really slacking off and not holding myself accountable.
Like you're talking into my own head there. That's the story of my day too. I engage my empathy circle. And these are people who I know don't tread lightly. They care about me, but they care enough about me to give me honest feedback. And that we have that mutual accountability with one another personally, and I have people gathered around me professionally. Because I'm a leader too, it's easy for people to just agree with everything I say all day long, and that isn't good. You certainly don't want that. So I have to check myself often. And I will say probably asking my 16-year-old daughter, who, isn't always the kindest. She'll give the most direct feedback of anyone. But seriously, my husband is probably the person who, after listening to me maybe from afar on a phone call, only my side of the phone call, will say, wow, your voice, I know you're trying to be helpful, but your voice didn't sound helpful. Those are things I need to keep me in check for sure, and to find the balance, giving myself grace, but then knowing that I need to take certain actions to move forward and not feel like a slacker or believe I'm a slacker. And I definitely don't let people in my empathy circle that only tell me what I want to hear. You'll pick up on that eventually when it's all just positive stuff. So I think too, Michaela had a question in the chat box about leaders. That's tough. And I hear that a lot, and particularly from HR people who, you are the liaisons. You support all the levels all the time, and you're trying to make sure there's connection from the top down and the bottom up often. And there are people who just aren't very good at showing their compassion. There are definitely leaders like that, and there has to be some coaching with those people if you can do that. If you don't feel safe doing that, and Patrick Lencioni has a lot of good stuff about, and I've learned from other writers about confronting up. So human resource people, I think, are in a good position to share this information, because you're doing that out of kindness, and you know how people are experiencing that leader. And to say, hey, I really care about you and I care about the company, but I'm wondering if we should package the message this way or that way. Sorry, it's Patrick Lencioni. He's written several books, has a great podcast, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team you've probably heard about, Ideal Team Player. Oh, thank you. You even can spell it. Helping leaders get connected to resources that will maybe teach them some of those lessons. So Patrick Lencioni's new book actually is called The Motive, and it helps leaders decide, is my motive right? Am I in the right place to be a leader? Because if you're not warm and compassionate, and that's the message you need people to hear from the very top, and that person just doesn't have that, can you help craft the email for them and ask them to put it out? Maybe don't always put them in front of people if their physical reactions do not bring, they don't have the warm eyes, for instance. Bolster that leader up with lots of other people. But there's tons of resources, and I'm always happy to share. I'm a reader, and I believe readers are leaders, and leaders are readers. So if there's things that we can help people with, we actually at our own EAP practice do some kind of upper level professional coaching, and sometimes it's just a quick call or an email to let people process their experiences. Most of the time, leaders know maybe when they're not real good at those things. So to be able to say that to them up front, it brings them some relief. They can't be the everything to everyone. That was a long answer. Sorry. I'm really passionate about that topic.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, unfortunately, some leaders lack emotional intelligence, and that's kind of what you're talking about, is the lack of emotional intelligence. And another way that you can broach that with them is, if they're a goal-oriented person, then being able to say, I know that you want to connect with these people and that you want them to get it. And one thing you might try is, and then helping them know the things that they might consider trying to show that to show that they care, even if they don't. And maybe the more they do it, the more they'll get it. So.
Thank you. I love both of those answers. Appreciate that.
There were lots of chats. Sorry, I couldn't keep up with if there was another question or not. You're probably not able to either, Jenny.
Yeah, Stacy, I had to look up that word, allostatic overload. So
yeah, I
had to look it up while Stacy was talking. But yeah, I think that it's a really good point. People are overwhelmed with feelings, and when you're tired and you're having headaches and you're not eating well and you're not hydrated, you can't deal with the stress that you're under. And so going back to all of those things that Stacey talked about with the self-care and finding some tools that will work for you and being good to yourself, because my bet is that most of you think you're supposed to be better than you are. And the fact is we're all human and we're all just doing what we can to get through this. So be good to yourself, and that will help also when you recognize, I feel overwhelmed. I'll give myself 10 minutes to be overwhelmed, and then I'm done for the day. And then find ways to move on.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So I haven't seen any other questions come through the chat. So as we close today, one of the things that we talked about doing is kind of connecting about connecting. So many of us are very isolated physically. I know I personally live alone, so I'm not seeing people. I am living kind of. It's a love and hate relationship with Zoom meetings. But I definitely look forward to that opportunity to connect. So we were wondering kind of what strategies you are using in your workplaces to connect with people and kind of fight those feelings of isolation. And Stacey, if you want to share some of the things you've seen as people are chatting away.
Well, I will certainly say that I think you need to recognize every person's experience is different. So you just shared your experience, Jenny, and other people might be at home with a husband and 6 kids and trying to manage work and manage school and having kids at home. So recognizing that everyone's experiences are different. I heard a lot of people have talked about just the love-hate relationship with Zoom, and I hope that we cannot equate Zoom with only having meetings, work meetings. So I think it's important to make sure that you have some fun on those meetings. Sometimes encourage people to join the meeting 15 minutes before. I stole this from another Zoom session that I participated in. They call it the pre-party. Come to the pre-party where there's no agenda. It's just checking in. It's just having a good time. There are also lots of fun things that you can do for the first 15 minutes of a meeting. And I'll personally say I am called the fun hater at home and at work. So it has been a hard thing for me to figure that you can actually get work done and have fun at the same time. And we have done things like put on masks or wear hats or, have a fun kind of activity during a meeting. I've heard some companies say for the first 5 minutes of the meeting, they did a scavenger hunt. So if you're Zoomed in, everybody go find a spice that starts with the letter of your first name, and the first one who can run back and show it to the camera wins a prize. So those are all things that I think are fun. I saw somebody say they had a private Instagram account. We actually have seen people set up group me's, like group chat sessions, and put out challenges every once in a while. For instance, yesterday our group challenge at our office was, what are you eating for dinner? Before that, it was, what's your favorite May Day memory as a child? What's your favorite or what's something you're grateful for today, and snap a picture and send it. You can participate or not participate, because some people it's overwhelming and it might be a little vulnerable and a little private, but other people love it, and it's nice to be able to do that in a variety of different ways. I would also encourage individual conversation. We have found that more power comes from that than lots of the group communication.
Thank you. How about you, Terry?
I think that a lot of the ideas that I would have had are, Stacey mentioned, or people are talking about having those virtual happy hours and doing fun things on the calls, or having fun things that you can do out at, like the challenges and stuff. One of the things I think is important when you do return to the workplace is to connect over those things that you missed out on. The fact is that if somebody's died, you haven't been able to have a funeral, or if somebody had a birthday or got married, or those other kind of things that you would have celebrated in the last 2 months that you didn't get to celebrate or mourn. One option it would be to have a meeting together to acknowledge all those things and wish people happy birthday. Have that, if you got somebody who's pregnant, have a virtual baby shower. Anything that you can do, whether it's in person when you get back or also virtually, is to acknowledge those things would be helpful, I think.
I love those ideas. And I love the things that have come through on chat. This is one of the reasons that I'm so looking forward to our HR roundtables next Friday, because I think we're going to learn so much from each other and go, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? And you don't have to, because that's why we are in this community. I'm just catching up on chat now.
Lots of good stuff.
Yes, it really, really is. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. And thank you, Terry and Stacy, for being on our call and preparing this wonderful content. I think it's something that we've been really hungry for and needing for a while. So really, really appreciate you partnering with us to bring this great content to our group. I'm going to advance the slides one more time because we are now providing recertification credits for our programming. We've applied to HRCI for this event and just are waiting on the code. So please do email us if you need that. If you need recertification information for previous programs, we may have that. This is our first time including it on the slide, so just reach out to us if you need that information for your recertification efforts. And that's all we have for today. So thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you and more on our call on Friday for the legislative update. Again, we've got some great guests joining us to tell us all of the latest things that we need to know from a compliance perspective. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Take good care.